Hello, Global Theater. My name is Jerry Fielka. Today's August 19, 2023. We want to thank Rob Grant and his amazing podcast. I'm probably wrong about everything. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here with one of the greats of all time, Simon Prentis. And I'm being sincere, Simon. Where in the heck you calling in from, Simon?
Where the heck am I calling from? I'm in a sort of I'm doing some posh camping in some sort of upstairs house where we've just moved into, and we've got builders around, and the whole thing's a mess. But it's London. It's West London, near the river. 10 minutes walk to the flooding zone. So it's cool. It's a nice little part of town. Chiswick is what it's called, if anybody wants to know.
Beautiful. So the first thing we might probe is the word archive, which is it's a verb, and then archives with an S is a noun.
Right.
And I want to tell you etymologically what the word breaks down to. But first, I want to tell you this line I learned this week. So maybe we even start on that. Your reactions to this line: etymology is the unconscious element of language.
I don't run with that. On the surface, I'm going to say no, because etymology is the unconscious history of language, I would say.
Okay.
In other words, that's you can pull the roots out from any word you like, but the way a word is currently used in any given iteration, as we use it now, it may mean something different, and the roots don't necessarily help you understand what it really means right now in currency.
That's good. That's really good. But more, just talk about whether it's element or history. Talk about etymology being unconscious of language. What does that mean word for you? That word in that sentence saying unconscious.
Because I think most people use language unconsciously all the time, not just of words, but of grammar and everything. When we speak, most of us speak without any effort whatsoever. And we struggle when we start to think about it, unless you're used to thinking about words and language. So when you break it down even further and think let's take a word like goodbye, for example. I mean, etymologically, that comes from God be with you, right? God be with you, God be goodbye. That's sort of what it originates from. Now, nobody who says goodbye today thinks God be with you. They just think goodbye, and so to pull out they're totally unconscious of that. And
that's good.
Even to pull it out, the history is in there, but is it I don't know what it gives you. Now it's just a noise we make when we want to say, okay, I've had enough, out of here, goodbye.
Yeah, it's phatic communication. It's water cooler talk. It is casual conversation, and it's beautiful what you said. I'm really glad we started this. We're going to get into archive, but you said the word think. That's important. But I'm curious of your reaction to George Lakoff, the neuroscientist, saying, we operate 80% of the time. He either says subconsciously or unconsciously, but he basically is saying we're operating 20% conscious. So you're saying we're on automatic pilot with words. We just let them flow out. But I feel that right now I'm hopefully 100% conscious that I'm with you and we're trying to dialogue. But there is that Lakoff percept theory 80% right now happening. Are we 80% operating subconsciously and unconsciously?
We're connecting as closely as we can, but the medium we're using is language, right? And if we cut language out of this, I'd be just staring at you and you'd be staring at me, and it would be just like, hey, Jerry, and I'd be reading you as an animal, and I'd be getting whatever I get off you. But the use of words already puts you down one tunnel. The fact that we're using English rather than Japanese or any other language gives you one spin on it. And the thing is, all the words that we use, because we don't understand or think about the etymology or the grammar or anything like that. We're using patterns essentially that other people have created. Now, if you're a poet or a comic or somebody who's using language really creatively, or James Joyce, I mean, this is your field of speciality. I mean, Finnegan's Wake, that's what happens when you try to go totally conscious with language. You go into somewhere that is too difficult for most people to handle, because language is, it's a tool that we inherit. And to the extent you inherit anything, it's kind of unconscious. But it allows us to tap into what we think we're conscious of. But then again, what do we really know? You know, I mean, there's all that too. I mean, you know, what we think we're conscious of and what we really are conscious of. I think that language is we mostly use it unconsciously.
Yeah, the good dynamic range there, dude. It was like when you whispered, you brought it down in the dynamic of communicating something a little deeper, because I think that's both of us in our attraction to Zappa was there's a deeper level. That's fine to be on the surface level.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
there is a deeper level, and how often are you going to be aware and conscious of the deeper level? And it's like the great McLuhan line, it's a joke. It's they send a message to the deep sea diver from the boat that he's connected to, and they go, surface at once, ship is sinking. So it's like going down. Or the other one is you're on a hike in the backwoods with your guide, you know, your indigenous guide, and you're the white explorer, and he's like, he knows the land, and then you go, I think we're lost, and the guide goes, we not lost, teepee lost. You know, our base camp is lost. We're not lost. Our base camp is lost. So this awareness of level, which I think your book and I love all your podcasts that you've done explaining to these smarty pants podcasters. They love you, man. It's so good, and the dogs are barking, and they're like, you know, I love it. It is so good that it communicates a lot more to me, because I'm such a bad reader, that to listen to you explain your book with verbal is so more important. And then one other thing before we get back to archiving is there's another great McLuhan observation in one of his books, is that one culture, you probably know it, goes up to when two people meet, they go up and smell each other as a way to communicate. They don't necessarily say words. So they're using a different sense rather than the ear or you know, verbiage. You know, they smell each other. So this is the breakdown of archive as a noun. 1600 records or documents preserved as evidence. And then you get deeper, and it's Greek for town hall, public building. Be the first, the ARCHON, the archon or arch, that word, the first ruler, the chief magistrate. So that's the roots of the word. But then there's 1400 to keep safe, where archiving is a verb, is 200 years before it is a noun, to keep safe, free from harm, be like to save. So there's two questions I'm going to ask, and you can suss it out. If we know the Zen saying, be here now, Baba Ram Dass, we know that Frank Zappa explored Zen. We know that I got attracted to Eastern philosophies, like most stupid white people in America, through Alan Watts, which is great. He's a stand-up comedian, and he really turned us on, and then we get it through the LSD 60s culture and be here now. Why should we live in the past or live in the future when we're trying to be present? I mean, the beauty of Frank Zappa was when he played his music for us live, that was the epitome of it.
Yes.
It wasn't listening to it on the records. It was engaging in the sacred ceremony of live music. So be here now. Why would we ever want to save crap? Oh yeah, for history means to learn and all that. No, why would we ever save crap, or why would we ever think about the future? And so the bottom line prompt besides that is archive more innate or more invented? And just to finish, why did the Egyptians put stuff in their coffin? Because okay, so any thoughts on all that gobbledygook?
Okay. All right. Well, sort of maybe to attack it from the etymology aspect. I mean, it's certainly true, I'm sure, since you read it out of a dictionary or somewhere, that the etymology goes back to the ruler in the town hall and so forth. But the aspiration, if you like, to archive stuff, I mean, that is the origin of writing. If one really goes back in time, if you go back to Babylon or before the Sumerians, the very first writing was about keeping records of who had what, so that there was an archive to go to in the case that there was an argument about, what I lent you or you lent me or any of that kind of stuff. So why would anybody keep an archive? I don't think it's necessarily contrary to the sense or the importance of being here now. I mean, it's more about, those who are ignorant of history are doomed to repeat it kind of thing. If you don't know, no matter, even if you're just in the moment moves as a moving thing, and you're going to confront issues as you move forward through time that have been confronted before, and people have learned lessons from that. And if you're able to record that and then pass that on, I mean, that is the essence of civilization. That's in a sense the logic of language that I kind of explore in the book. I mean, people have been doing this for as far back as we know. The archive, the royal archives of Babylon, they were baked tablets that they kept in these huge great rooms that we still can find now. And in every stage of history, wherever you go, any civilization, people have wanted to keep records because partly for avaricious reasons, they want.
Wait, what's that word mean? What's avaricious?
Avaricious, greedy. It's just a fancy word for greedy. God damn it.
Greedy. Okay.
Yeah, greedy. So, but I think it's more about wanting to know what can be known, because I think that doesn't stop you from being here now. It just allows you perhaps to be more aware of being here now. If you're, I mean, language itself, again, I explore this in the book to a certain extent, is the process of becoming conscious. If you can tag things with noises, then you can talk about them and calculate them and so forth. So you can still have that and be Zen. I mean, that's part of the whole Zen thing. It's like having that, but then learning to let go of it. So you can be here now, but you don't have to stay ignorant. You can still be informed. I don't know. Does that help?
Well, that was good. That was good. So you would say archiving is more innate or more invented? Would you?
Invented to the extent that I think it's tied deeply to language. I think if we didn't have language, we wouldn't be archiving anything.
Is language innate or invented?
Invented.
Is it? So doesn't Chomsky say? Wait, Chomsky says language is innate.
He does, and I had a big argument with him at the end of last year. Didn't work out. He wasn't having it, but You mean on a Zoom? You did? Not on a Zoom, on email. I did.
You actually.
I did 15 rounds with Noam Chomsky.
Wow.
Well, I finally got to the point where enough people were liking my book, and enough people who I thought were credible, serious people were liking my book. That I thought, because I knew at some point I was going to have to confront Chomsky, at least not him necessarily personally, but his theory, because I think it's wrong. And it took me a long time to work up the nerve to have a go. But one day I thought, fuck it, there he is. He's wrong. Let me have a go at him. And when I say he's wrong, what I mean by that is the theory is the standard model, if you like, is that our brains got bigger and bigger and bigger, and then one day suddenly language popped out. Our brains became language ready, and there we were. And it's like, okay, fine as a theory, but there's absolutely no evidence of that whatsoever. I mean, they can't find this language gene. I mean, Chomsky says that something happened in our brain about 70,000 years ago, well, maybe 60,000 years ago. Something happened, and we were suddenly able to do grammar. I mean, that is literally what he thinks, and everybody follows him thinks that. But I'm saying grammar is not the most important thing. Was words. If you don't have words, you can't have grammar, and therefore, you get the rest of that argument. So I'm saying the initial development of language drove the growth of the brain, not the way around. It wasn't that we had a big brain and then we had language. It was no. Language stimulated the brain, and then the brain got bigger and bigger, and here we are.
Now, beautiful. But are you considering publishing the emails between you and him?
Eventually, yes.
Good. Thank you. And so there's one thing you said, Simon. You want to know what can be known. That's a beautiful statement. But also, there's this big thing about unlearning. And and so what's the flip of that? You want to know what can be known by letting go what you know. How do you unlearn? Is that?
Let me give you an Aikido analogy. I might have said this to you once before, but when I started learning Aikido, I remember being told, they said, okay, so it's 3 years to learn the basic techniques. If you get serious about it, you put your time in every day, you learn and you learn and you learn all the techniques that the master taught. Yeah. And then it's 10 years to unlearn them.
Wow.
Meaning that in any given situation where in a real life situation, if somebody jumps you, you're going to have to respond in the way that the circumstances dictate, not, well, maybe I should do this move here or that move here. It won't be a move. It'll be something that's a conglomeration of all of them, the essence of, because the moves that you learn are just particular examples of how Aikido works. And the thing to do is to forget the form of it and just get to the essence of it. And I feel that's the same way that relates to what we were saying about archives to the extent of knowing what you can be known, but nonetheless, you have to be a kind of a moving target in the present all the time. It's like, yes, you know that, but that shouldn't stop you reacting in a novel way if you need to with the present.
And let's just go back a hair in regards to Frank Zappa saying, I don't care if I'm remembered, or whatever the exact quote is. I don't want to be remembered. Is that Frank over romanticizing what he's really trying to say is, I'm glad I'm going to be remembered? Because, this great thing Bob said once is Frank reverently satired what he didn't, what he really loved. So it's almost like, I'm going to make fun of black music, but I love it. White boy trouble. Ooh, God, with the dress on. I mean, he's quoting Ray Charles, the most basic Ray Charles in White Boy Trouble, but he's making fun of it so deep. So is he making fun when he's talking by saying nothing is what I want, a true Zen saying, I don't want to be remembered? Or the classic Zappa contradiction is, to me, is, I just write this music for myself. If other people like it, great. It's like, come on. And, that's a great, your thoughts on this. Is he over romanticizing, or is what's going on there?
And so far as wanting to be remembered goes, I always thought that was just sort of, maybe just trying a little too hard, but
Yeah.
at the same time, I think what he meant was, I'm not thinking about being remembered. I'm thinking
Yeah.
about just doing what I can while I
Yeah.
can.
He's living
And
in the present.
exactly,
I'm
he's like,
thinking about making this album. I'm going to die next week, but I'm going to keep working until I die.
yeah. And when I'm dead, that's it. Who cares? You know, because I'm sure he felt there was nothing going to follow on after that. So it was just a question of keeping. I mean, that's why he was all the time. I mean, right to the end, he was working on stuff.
Yeah.
Even when he was sick as a dog, he was still.
It's like the guy at the customs officer. The customer officer says, "What are you on, Frank?" Like you're on some drug. He goes, "I'm on duty." I'm on duty. It's like Frank was on duty all the time. He was always on duty.
Yeah, he was. But he was also always doing what he wanted, which is, it wasn't work in that sense. It was just something that he was always doing.
Play.
Needed to be done.
The ultimate compulsion. It was compulsion. And Shelly Manne, one of the greatest jazz drummers ever, who played on like Lumpy Gravy, I said to him on the phone once, I says, "What was it like working with Frank Zappa?" He says, "That dude knew what he wanted and he got what he wanted." That's pretty amazing for this jazz, icon senior of Frank. When Frank came in and Chris Lieb said, "What was it like playing with Frank?" He says on Lumpy Gravy, he says, "He looked like the office supply delivery boy with a conductor, a baton in one hand and a Les Paul in the other. He was like a young kid." Like, you ever see the movie Wrecking Crew? Go watch that movie. Tommy Tedesco's son made a film called The Wrecking Crew, and it's all the guys who backed every band in LA and Frank Sinatra and the Beach Boys, and they don't talk about Frank. But at the very end, there's one shot of Frank, and it goes by really fast, like in the credits, because Frank was tapped into the Wrecking Crew, and these guys were the senior dudes that he accessed. He accessed them for Lumpy Gravy and for it's beyond. But let's
the ensemble modern was pretty much the Wrecking Crew of the modern
ensemble modern. Yeah, that was like, hey, we're the best band in the world, Frank. We're Stockhausen's house band. We'll do anything you said, and we're not going to fuck around here anymore.
I was just going to add one thing there, because when you say he knew what he wanted and he got it, which is true, but at the same time, the point I was going to make was that I always felt he was so open to what other people were saying. He was like an information sponge.
Yeah.
If somebody had something to say that was of interest, he just wanted to hear it, and then that would change what was then going on, perhaps, because he was like a moving target.
Yeah, it's like
it was always could be modified by anything, anywhere, anytime, for no reason at all. All that,
So well put, Simon. And what's sad is that Tommy Mars isn't getting interviewed enough and sourced enough, because he talks, whenever I see him on the street and we get into it, he talks about this moment when Frank said, "Don't do that," and then 3 days later Tommy did it, and he goes, "What'd you just do?" And it's that, like, wait a minute, and people go, "He ripped the people off." It's like, what do you mean he ripped? He pulled out of Tommy what Tommy might not even knew he had, and Tommy knew, I'm here to contribute. I'm not here to fiddle over. But my friend who won a couple Oscars says IP. I goes, "What's IP?" He says, "Intellectual property." I goes, "IP on intellectual property." The other one, I think we talked about this, but Andy Hallahan said this, that Frank said in some interview, and we got to find where it was, "I think every song I write is a hit."
Yes, he did say that somewhere. I know.
Yeah, and if you ever find it, that is an amazing statement, because just oh yeah, I'm in this world. I'm a singer-songwriter, and I write songs, and I think every song I write is a hit, you know? So
you wouldn't put it out if you didn't think that, I think,
so you brought up the word true, and I know I would love to just dabble in this for a second. Louis Buñuel said, "I'm for anyone who seeks the truth, but I part ways when they claim they found it."
But I
So
part ways. Oh, right, yeah.
yeah, when they claim it. Now 90% of people go, "Oh, I love that. That's accurate." And one guy said, "No, that's bullshit, because if I'm gonna seek something, it's because I want to find it." And so the question I've sort of morphed is, if the destination, if the journey is more important than the destination, why do we have to seek or name a destination if the journey's more important?
Because the destination never stays still. I mean, you're looking for the truth, but when you get to the truth is sort of what you were looking for at the point where you didn't know what it was. But when you get there, then that leads to, it's the sort of thesis, antithesis, and synthesis, and all that. The synthesis then becomes a thesis, and then you move on, right? There's no absolute truth. It's
Right.
So the seeking is the crucial thing.
The seeking, yeah. But the people who changed the world forever in the 20s in Paris were flaneurs. And it was called psychogeography, and they just wandered aimlessly, and they've changed the world. So we don't have to name a destination, but it seems as though we want to know what can be known. That seems to be kind of this sense of security blankety truth.
Yes. I mean, isn't it more, that questions occur to you that I think more and more, the more I get sort of involved in thinking about writing and things, it's the most important thing is the question. If you don't have the question, then you can have the answer, but you won't see it because you didn't have the question. And that's the thing to be looking for all the time. And that just arises from the nature of having this system of categorizing perceptions, because it's all about, they never ultimately fit together. So and then another question occurs. I mean, what I'm working on at the moment a lot is, I read this thing. Somebody said, it was talking about evolutionary history, and the notion that evolution is in some sense a resolution of a problem, right? Each time some new species or some evolutionary development takes root, then it's because it's better at dealing with some situation than the previous part of it was. That's what evolution is. Now, if you take that and you roll it right back to the beginning and you say, so what is the problem to which life is the solution? Now, that to me is the one I'm just kind of like blowing my mind on at the moment and trying to work with. But I mean, that's a question that we may not have an answer to, but because that's the other thing, not all questions have answers necessarily, but we can't help, I think, the nature of the consciousness that we create through language means that we're constantly going to have queries, and it's the pursuit of the ones that matter to you that makes life worth living, or something, he said grandly.
Yeah. Well, it's the guy goes to his guru and he says, "What's the best question I can ask you?" And the guru goes, "The one you just asked me." Simon, can humans think? Can we think without language?
Depends how you define think, but obviously other animals without language can certainly calculate what's going on. I mean, you just look at animals hunting, for example. They're clearly seeing ahead of what's likely to happen and strategizing around that. So if you want to call that thinking, that's thinking, yes. But it's difficult to get into abstract areas without language, I think, because you just don't have enough. You can't specify it. I mean, I mean, you know, animals appear to have a sense of fairness, but they can't think what is fairness and then take that further, because there's no tools to do that with. Language is just a tool for tagging and then manipulating perception, if you like. So I think, can animals think without language? Yeah, they can. Would be my answer. You've gone very silent suddenly.
And no, that was beautiful. And Turing asks, is thinking a function of the soul?
Oh. I would turn that around and say the soul is a function of thinking.
Oh, wow, that's good.
No, I mean, that's kind of yeah, I elaborate on that in my book somewhere, but I think it's, you know, the whole notion that we have this sort of separate identity is, I mean, again, going back to, imagine we didn't have any words at all, right? It's just me and you, no language. I'm looking at you, you're looking at me. I can make a series of judgments about you from your general demeanor, maybe, but I'm not going to have a strong image of you as an individual soul. You know, it's only because I know you, we can finesse our understanding of each other through language, that I can build up a portrait of you that then becomes, you know, this image of Jerry. And then, you know, when you're gone, I'll still have this image of Jerry, and that there will be this sort of, you know, the idea of the soul comes with language, is my sense of it. So yeah, I reverse it on you.
Yeah. That's the fourth step of the tetrad. It's beautiful. What does it become when flipped to an extreme? What does it flip into? And it's the kid called me up on the Zappa hotline once, and he says, how does Frank write this music? And I go to the movie 200 Motels, and there's a shot of Ringo, and he's got some dry ice in a what do you call those? A magic lantern.
Aladdin's lamp. Yeah.
Aladdin's lamp, and he's pouring it on music paper, and it's smoking up. And Ringo's going like this as Frank writing music. Soul, brother, soul. He's literally yelling soul, like it's Frank going, I'm going to put some soul in this music.
Yeah, but there's another aspect of that, you see, because soul is a sort of shorthand for authenticity, I think.
Yeah.
You know, to the extent that you're, I refer you to chapter 4 of my book. But it's sort of, and I was thinking about this. We might talk about the blue light later on. Maybe you raised that.
Yeah, we're going to touch on the blue light.
That to me is a kind of like the core of the blue light is about authenticity, and it's sort of a real mother lode of the conceptual continuity, I think, if one wants to go there on that one. But just to talk about putting soul into it, again, we're back to Zen. It's like stripping away all the stuff that isn't, that comes with the territory of being in a culture that is mediated by language, and all the things that you're taught as a kid, all the things that you should do that are right, and are, you know, all the things that you do because it's just automatic and you're unconscious of it. You know, the more you can strip that away, the more authentic you become, and then that to me would be about sort of soul. If there is a soul, it's whatever you bring to the party that nobody else does because of your particular DNA and experiences and so forth. But it's about stripping back the stuff that isn't you. You know, again, it's like unlearning the techniques. That's why, for me, living in Japan for so long was a hugely important experience in that way, because it made me, insofar as you learn a completely different vocabulary of living, if you like. It's not just language, it's just the way they are. And then everything you have to think, oh shit, did we do it like this? Well, why do we do it? Oh, why do we do it like that? Oh, well, I didn't even know we did it like that. Oh my God. You start to question everything, take it apart, and realize that what you thought was you actually was part of being British, or, you know, European, or that was just unconscious stuff that you weren't even aware of. So being authentic, I think, is for me, is to try and strip away all the cultural baggage as much as you can, and that's, you know, just so you can't be with the others, right?
Yeah.
Just like you.
It's sort of like all these great artists like R. Crumb Frank. He summarized it on David Letterman. I don't got any brown lipstick in my makeup kit.
There you go.
That's putting it bluntly on the line.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go into the blue light. But first, you brought up that word perception. Let's just go this quickie question in first. Is perception reality?
No, but we have no means of knowing that.
Yeah, very good.
Does that work? I mean, perception is all we got, but whether that is reality is a totally different matter.
So I don't know when Frank wrote The Blue Light or, how this song came about, but it is unbelievable because one, Wilhelm Reich, Kandinsky, Leni Riefenstahl, I've studied blue light and its phenomenon for years. I have a whole workshop lecture on blue light in the arts and literature, and it's unbelievable. Like rock and roll, it's so pervasive through so many things, like conceptual continuity. Besides Frank, all of a sudden writing the blue light, and he starts with two words: your ethos, your pathos. So I go to Etymology Online. It's the most used website that I use. It's the main website I use. So every word that comes up that I'm studying, I do it. In ethos, it means manners, the genius of a people. But I got to divert. Do you know what this guy told me that Frank said genius is? And I think if you ever find this, Frank said genius is when you steal from other people and they can't tell who you stole from. And it's like, dude, we know Frank stole from Edgar Varese, Spike Jones, and Johnny Guitar Watson. But indeed, is Frank a genius? And then, you have the word I in genius, and then you have us. So words evoke more than their meaning. So this is funny how in etymology they put genius in quotes. The genius of a people, characteristic spirit of a time and place.
Right.
So that's what etymology defines ethos is. And as you said earlier, it does, etymology is just some intellectual trying to figure out where the word came from. It doesn't mean the word came from that. It's our hunch, and then we believe etymology, and then pathos is the next word he sings. Your ethos, your pathos. Oh, wait a minute, I left this out. Ethos in dictionary means fundamental character or spirit of a culture. So it's a little different than what etymology is. But it's funny, they both said characteristic of the spirit. And then this thing we just were talking about, Simon, the dictionary says ethos means the underlying sentiment that informs our beliefs. The underlying. Okay, so that's ethos. Now for pathos. Etymologically, pathos means that which arouses pity, sorrow, to suffer. And the dictionary says that which evokes pity and sadness. So now, right off the bat, without even going into the whole song, what is Frank saying? Your ethos, your pathos, for your sensibility of the song.
I've been sort of thinking about this recently, and it seems to me that just sort of sets the tone for the whole song, because it's about some guy or guys or the way in which people set about their life in an inauthentic manner, if you like. It's like, why am I living? What am I doing? What's going on here? Well, Death Valley days straight ahead. Oh shit, I'm gonna die. What's this all about? Should I hang out with the highway patrol? Am I all the kind of things that that bother people, or that the things that they use to try and support a notion of themselves that will help them get through this thing that we mostly don't think about very much. So your ethos is, to me, I read that as sort of, just a way of referencing your guiding star, if you like, your ethos. What's the thing that what's driving you here? What's your motivation? How are you living your life? What your ethos? And then the pathos, to me, again, is about how it turns into sadness for most people. There's a sadness about not being able to close your fist on authenticity because you've sold out somewhere along the line. And we all do it. I mean, it's not sort of taking a superior point of view here. It's just saying your ethos, your pathos, those are the two poles of your life. Your ability to close in on a true, authentic ethos leads to pathos. And then
let me react to a couple that, because that was beautiful. It really set the ground for this song so well. You really summarized that well, because Paul Schrader, the guy who wrote Taxi Driver, said the role of the artist is to attempt to sell out but fail. Now that's like, again, romanticizing something, and most people go, oh, that's so cool, because I tried to sell out, but my art is so authentic that I failed. So it's really like you're sort of tapping. I would have loved to ask Frank his opinion of that thought, because the Schrader brothers went to Frank's house. Paul and his brother went over there and talked with him. And Schrader's a heavy dude, because he's in the Lucas, Spielberg, Coppola world, but he didn't come out of John Ford. He came out of Bresson, and his parents wouldn't let him watch movies growing up. So if you do that, you better watch out, because your kid might grow up and watch Taxi Driver. Yikes! So it is heavy to think, when you said to me just now, well, we all sell out. Well, Frank sold out. He can go on Letterman and say, I don't have brown lipstick, but he can also know how to tap in. Oh, I can play a punk song. I can write a punk song. I can be hip and trendy and make fun of it and do it sincerely, whatever. So, or do this when you play a guitar solo. Look up into the sky and like go, ooh. With the pooched out succulents.
Yes, absolutely. But the ethos and the pathos, I hadn't realized this until quite recently, just how exactly those two words are the precise poles of the entire song. And then to sort of then flip it into the Three Musketeers is absolute fucking genius, because pathos then becomes, does he say pathos or pathos? Your ethos, your pathos.
Your pathos,
because Athos,
the third one, he says Porthos.
What
is that?
Well, Athos, Porthos, and Aramis were the Three Musketeers from the book. Right? So they were the three buddies that used to hang out together and try and save the world. In the Three Musketeers, the story, which I'm not very familiar with, but I happen to know that that's what their names were. And so he's then sort of flipping it. And then the thing I didn't know until just this evening when I was talking to my dear wife about it is that Aramis is the name of a perfume that was very popular in the 70s. Right? Did you know that?
Yes,
so
I knew that. Because then he repeats another yuppie white metro guy's perfume, Brut Cologne.
Okay. Well, so the Aramis, so he slipped in the Three Musketeers there in a sort of really a Joycean move, I would say.
Very much.
And then you've got Aramis linked to Brut Cologne and Brut Cologne and all that too. Then you're writing home.
You're writing home. Then you're hopeless. Then your hopelessness. Because Frank had a great statement. He said, you can't have a war against drugs. You should have a war against hopelessness, because that's why people take drugs.
Oh, yeah. I didn't know
And
that
I
one. That's good. Yeah.
Yeah, is rising around you. You like it. It gives you something to do.
In the daytime. Oh, Jesus. When did you last see daytime television? Oh, God. Talk about.
I mean, I'm going to skip. There's so much there. You already went over it. You're going to Highway Patrol, Winchell's Donuts. I remember a guy called up from Europe on the Zappa hotline once, and he goes, "What is Winchell's Donuts?"
Yeah. Well,
it's pizza. I mean, do these people pay? Did they get? Does Frank get residual checks for advertising the product? Product placement, man.
Yeah, sure.
But let's go to the end of the song. I mean, there's a lot we could cover for hours and hours. Then he goes,
Yeah.
your ethos, your portholes, your flagpole, your porthole. And now here's where he effects precede causes. He delves into Simon's book years before Simon writing it. Your language, you're frightened. The future, you can't even speak your own fucking language. You can't read it anymore. You can't write it anymore. Your language, the future of your language. So, I mean, what you're studying speech and language, what is communicating you there? Yeah.
Well, I'm assuming that particular thing came out of the bit where on the same album he's talking about which song is it, where he gets the guy, he's passed a note and it says instead of we're, the guy's written were. What is it? Oh God. Somebody passes something up from the audience and it's Buddy, I think. And Frank tries to read it out and he can't, because the guy, he's supposed to have written, he meant to write we're, which would be WE apostrophe RE, right? He's written were, and Frank reads it as were and he can't understand it, and then realizes that the guy can't even write his own fucking language. Which is
I see. So it's a conceptual continuity clue into another song.
Yeah. Not so much. Yeah, I think that's what probably generated it in that particular context. However, I suspect, given what I know about him and what you know about him, that he was just talking about the degeneration of language in general. Because I mean, that's the other thing about being unconscious of language, is that it just starts to shrink, and the number of words that you know and use atrophies, because you don't need to use them if you're just kind of barreling down the track of culture, and you don't ask questions, and you don't try to extend your ability to express what you're thinking, perhaps. But then that in turn then leads to you're frightened. It's the less you are able to probe or think about your own consciousness of what you're doing, the more frightening it becomes, unless you're with the band of the Three Musketeers and hanging out with everybody else, the others just like you, because that's the thing. You can't have both. You can't be authentic and hang out with everybody else. At some point, you have to kind of really drill down on what you are and what you want, and what is you and what isn't you, and hanging out with the others isn't conducive to that, should we say.
Yeah. I just noticed the paragraph or verse before that. He says, that takes us back when we used to smoke a banana. You would scrape the stuff off the middle, you would bake it, and then you would smoke it. You even thought you was getting ripped from it. Now, the deep story there is Walter Boart, the author of Operation Mind Control, he faked that banana peels would get you high, because there was a few letters in the chemical name of like LSD or some psychotropic drug, and banana peels. And so he did it on purpose in the underground newspaper, say if you smoke banana peels it'll get you high, to see if the CIA would smoke banana peels. And they did. The prank worked, but also hippies smoked it and said it got them high. So that's placebo. If I read it in my own underground newspaper, it must do it to me.
Absolutely.
And like, look at what Frank's saying. You even thought it was getting you ripped. And I mean, I talked to major counterculture heroes later, and they thought, no, I thought it was true. They didn't. I mean, was Frank knowing that without knowing it? You know, so was he overly conscious? And then maybe it came out later that it was, but you know, just to say the line in this song, the future of your language, Simon, since you've written your book and you've dialogued with so many people about it, what is the future of your language? What is the future of our language in regards to what you've learned since you wrote your book about topics that you wrote on in your book? Have you had like new epiphanies or new learning?
No, not about the future of the language. Well, I mean, I think, you know, the immediate issue is the, I mean, this is a whole slightly different topic, but I've begun to understand or think of language. I do mention it in the book, but not really to the extent that I should have done, and it needs exploring more, is the notion of language being AI. You know, we're kind of very scared of AI now, and we think, oh, AI is going to be this thing that's going to just run ahead of us, and suddenly we won't know what's going on because the AI will be in a different realm. It'll be able to process vast amounts of data that we can't have access to, so we won't even know why it's doing anything. Well, in terms of, you know, other animals on the planet, that's exactly what language is.
Yeah.
Because language creates an artificial world where we can plug into everything that's ever been known, if you like. I mean, you know, the language that we're using on a daily basis is the result of tens of thousands of years of stuff that's been worked out, and we just get that from day one. And you know, now with the internet, I can find out anything I like. Now, animals have nothing of that. So for any animal looking at humans, it's like, what the fuck is going on? They have no idea. They don't even know what is going on, let alone having access to it. So AI is language is, as far as we're concerned, AI. We just don't realize that because we're part of it. It's an abstract world that we just inhabit because we're born into it, but that is what it is. So what is the future of language? Well, it seems to be going in the direction of outsourcing the algorithm that we use in our heads. I mean, at the moment, we have only the data that we have access to, but AI has access to every damn thing. You know, I mean, let me just go back for a moment to what I was saying about my dialogue with Chomsky. After I sort of, you know, run out of road on that, and then just about a couple of months later, ChatGPT comes online, and I thought, let me run my thesis by ChatGPT and see what it says, right? So I started, you know, basically running the same questions as I was saying to Chomsky, and it came back with the usual stuff. And then I said, yeah, but that can't be right because of this, you know. And then it goes, actually, yeah, you're right on that. Okay, so all right, we'll take that for granted. And then so I pushed back on it and pushed back on it. And I had a much more intelligent conversation with AI about language than I did with Chomsky, because he was just going, no, that's ridiculous. No, that's trivial, you know. And it's like, well, no, that doesn't tell me anything if you tell me it's trivial unless you explain why it's trivial. He didn't want to do that. So, but the point I'm about to make on that is, so I had that conversation with AI because that's my field of knowledge and expertise. However, if I were a doctor with a specialist knowledge of a kidney or some shit, I could then, with the same ChatGPT, have that conversation, or any field of knowledge. AI can tap into everything. A human can only, just because we have a limited brain power that's biologically determined, we can only know a certain number of fields in great depth, you know. AI's got the whole damn thing. So what's the future of language is probably some kind of interface that allows us to use that extra dimension of data gathering, really, and the processing of the data that it does. I mean, we've just given it a little algorithm, which is really the same thing we're using in our own heads, because what are we doing? We're just taking the data that we know and looking for contradictions and going, that doesn't seem to work. Maybe we should think about it that way. It's just quite a simple algorithm to try and avoid cognitive dissonance, if you like. That's all I think ChatGPT is doing, but it's got access to every fucking thing.
Yeah.
So it's extending language out into another dimension. So if there is a future of language, that's where it's going.
It's really good. It's beautiful what you said. Because, you know, everybody's like, oh, ChatGPT, it's just another tool. I'll deal with it and hijack it and turn its buttons off and turn its buttons on and push it and push it and push it and don't push it. But, you know, it really is words evoke more than their meaning. And believe me, it's so important that you put that out on a medium.com or a Substack or something, or a YouTube video that, and you're doing it right now. Hey, we're doing it right now. It just happened. You dialogued with Chomsky on email, and then you pushed back on ChatGPT, and it gave you more than Chomsky gave you. So that's the proof that AI, for all these people who doubt AI, and you're not putting Chomsky down. You're just saying he's human, and ChatGPT has humanness. It has humanness in it, and it sort of delivered the goods a little more than Chomsky did.
And the difference, I think, is that it doesn't have skin in the game. You know, Chomsky has
no skin in the game.
Chomsky's got, like, you know, 50, 60 years of his career riding on this. If he's wrong, you know, then 60 years of his life sort of was wasted asking the wrong question. It's like, you know, did the sun go around the earth or did the earth go around the sun? It's like he's been saying the sun's going around the earth, and I'm saying, no, actually the earth's going around the sun. I mean, metaphorically speaking. So he's got a lot of reasons why he isn't willing to maybe consider that other possibility, whereas ChatGPT doesn't give a shit. It's like sort of whatever seems to make sense on the basis of all the information it has. That's fine. You know, it's
Simon, that is a trait that I observed in Frank Zappa. He was on a radio show and they were talking about, you know, language in rock and roll, you know, whatever that PMRC is. They're talking about, Frank had a great line. He'd go, if everybody's listening to the words of music and 80% of music is all about love, then why isn't everybody loving each other? And a woman called up. I was a talk show, and this is the beauty of radio, switching to two-way communication rather than one-way. It was a talk show, and a woman called up and says, Frank, that 80% of those songs is about puppy love. And he went, you're right. He was willing to lay down. I went up to him once, and I said, you know, Buzu Chavez says, keep a little paper in my shoe. What does that mean? He said, you know, you keep a little extra $1 or $5 bill on your shoe. Buzu had just told my friend, no, it means to block the hole in my shoe. And which goes to can't afford no shoes, which goes to Ray Charles saying, what is the meaning of the blues? He says, the meaning of the blues is a black man's walking down the street and he's got one shoe in his hand. And the white guy comes up to him and says, dude, did you lose a shoe? And the black man says, no, I found one. So it all gets down to can't afford no shoes. But the beauty is that Frank laid the cards on his table. He says, I was wrong. So, you know, it's not to say Chomsky should say I was wrong, but he could say, well, I'll consider that, or I'll research that. Because I think this flipping, Simon, if you take AI it could AI is artificial intelligence. You could flip it to what Marshall called IA, which is integral awareness, like integrate the awareness. It can flip into IA Richards, who was the big London dude at Cambridge who you should study him. New criticism. He changed McLuhan. He got McLuhan and Joyce, and it really shifted Marshall's thinking. Then,
what did he mean by integrated awareness? What did he mean by that?
Well, integrated awareness, we can go into that. What you think is the difference between awareness and consciousness? I think you've covered that well in other podcasts. But I think what Marshall's saying is integrate the big picture, like Pascal, the mathematician philosopher. In order to understand everything, you have to know this end of the spectrum and that end of the spectrum and everything in between and integrate it. But we have biases. Well, I'm going to lean towards consciousness needs this and awareness needs this. But you're going to hear what other people say and try to integrate it rather than saying, I know what I'm talking about. That's the bottom line. And so awareness is what I think is, for me to define what Marshall means by those two words is just kind of bullshitty. I'm just going on the basic hunch. But like, it's like Lily Tomlin said, reality is just a collective hunch. It's like we do have a collective hunch on what we think words kind of mean. We go along with it. But the other one is my friend goes, AI is artificial ignorance, which again is like, whether it's Frank saying stupidity or ignorance is the building block of the universe, it's unlearning and not knowing. So it could be artificial ignorance, or it could be, this is T.S. Eliot, and I wanted to go into this for a second, is auditory imagination. That's his big one, is AI is auditory imagination. Now, what that means, you can just go into that and study it on your own, but I'm always trying to figure it out. But T.S. Eliot said poetry is outing your inner dialogue. Now we know what Frank was doing with the blue light was writing poetry, but it's almost disguised as, well, it's in a song, so it's really song lyrics. But he is really, and we study, now you find out that Frank wrote a beat poem. He knew at one of his interviews, he says, I'm writing poetry. So you know that poetry is different. And I really wanted to ask you these two statements about poetry, just to go on a tangent, excuse me, is T.S. Eliot said that poetry is outing your inner dialogue. So I'm curious your thought on that. And then also Gary Snyder, the only beat poet who didn't die of drugs and still living, he's more a nature poet, said that he said an amazing line. I'm going to get it right here. My task as a poet entails the work of seeing the world without language and then bringing that seeing into language.
Definitely.
So, both of those ideas, any thoughts? Outing your inner dialogue as poetry, and this seeing the world without, how could you see the world without language, and then putting that new kind of seeing into language?
Yeah. It reminds me of, there's a colleague of mine, I think I can call him that, fellow translator, who he once described the act of translation, because he works from Japanese into and he described it as the descent into wordlessness. And when I heard him say that, I thought that is so right about translation, because people think of translation as, you look at a bunch of words and you get out a dictionary and you fiddle around with it and you come up with a bunch of words in the other language and put them together. And that is also true at the superficial level, but the deeper level, it's really about when somebody says something, you have to hear what they're saying without the words, if that makes sense. You know, that's kind of what the guy Jack Snyder was saying. You know, it's you have to really almost feel it, and then take that feeling and turn it into the other language. And you know, if you're fluent in the other language, then that's as easy as, well, not as easy, but it's just like when you're normally struggling to say anything in any language, you just have a feeling, you express it. So I would go with the poet sort of. Well, I'd go somewhere else actually. I mean, because I think for me, and this is why I mean, Frank's use of language I always thought was very poetic in the sense that I'm about to say, because he would always try to choose a word that didn't belong with the other word. You know, he would avoid cliches. He just had a knack for not using a cliche, and not only not using a cliche, turning a cliche on its head. So you would almost every sentence he spoke, there would be something that was odd about it, but odd in a way that made it more real, if you like. And that goes
Simon, let me interrupt. That's the McLuhan book. From Cliche to Archetype. You don't have to read it. That's what Frank did. He took from a cliche and he made it an archetype. Yeah.
Well, I'm not even sure he made it an archetype. I see it more in terms of derailing,
derailing.
Derailing unconsciousness, if you like, because to the extent that cliche is unconscious, right? Cliche is, you know, you hear a word and you think, oh, that's what you say. It's a beautiful sunset, or you know, all the stuff that you're supposed to say. And poetry is somehow about saying that stuff without using the words that you're supposed to say. In other words, to bring it to consciousness again, and just maybe to follow up with the idea of what the future of language, leaving AI out of it for a minute. Just language is always about renewing itself, because you get becomes cliched, and then what young people do with language every generation is they start reinventing it because it's tired and it's cliched. So the future of language is always renewed and will be different, you know, in the future, just as it was in the past. So
like when kids go, that's sick, and I go, you mean sick is good or sick is bad?
Yeah.
That's sick.
I just had a good one today. My son Oscar said, yeah, I was pretty murked, to be fair. Murked. I'd never heard murked before. But it's like, you know, I assume M-E-R-K, yeah.
What does it mean?
Well, just out of it, smashed, wasted, you know.
Oh, wasted.
Yeah, I was pretty murked, to be fair. And he was talking about, he'd been on some kind of festival and they were camping and it was really shit, and he was sleeping on the ground. And he said, yeah, but I was pretty murked, to be fair. He said murked, without the K. I'm pronouncing the K too. Yeah, that's good.
Let me add one little quickie before I forget. Someone said that translation etymologically is related to trader. You know, and if it's not etymologically, it was like kind of that's what you're doing. You're a trader to the original, but you're going more than the literal meaning. You're going for the metaphorical meaning, because you know, one of my favorite moments in your career was when you had to translate live, and you translated in front of some Japanese people and they all cracked up because they knew you did it a little off. And I was like, that was the ultimate moment, you know, because you said, I don't translate live, and they go, no, you've got to.
Yeah, no, I know. I did a lot of translating live, and it's a pretty high wire act, because you know you have to, especially if it's simultaneous, which is, you know, woo, that's you have to be really have descended into wordlessness to be able to get away with that, because you're
wire act. That is good.
But yeah, murked. I like murked. I thought that was. But sorry, you said about translation and trading. I don't know about trading. I'm not sure that's a.
No, trader.
Yeah, no, trader. I'm not. Yeah. I think no. You're more of a midwife than a trader, I think.
More of a midwife. That's good.
you're just giving birth to the other person's to the person's thought into a medium that the other people will understand.
Yeah. So, boy, we could go anywhere we want. I mean, we could stay on Frank for a minute because I like that idea too. And
I just wanted to say something about we missed a line from the blue light where he says, the thing about you need a hobby, so it's something to do in the daytime, right? Where is it? You like it, it gives you something to do. And then the public is rising around you. You like it. It gives you something to do in the nighttime, right?
Yeah.
As our bladders shrink in our old age, I begin to understand what that means about something to do at nighttime. Yes, you know what I'm talking about, Fiolka.
Yeah, that's the guy goes to the doctor and he says, I'm having trouble peeing. And the doctor says, how old are you? He says, I'm 80. He said, you peed enough. But it is. I mean, I actually have this podcast 4 times a week. And I actually had a guy, I said, what do you worry about when you go to bed at night? That's what Earl Morris asked Rumsfeld. I thought, what a great question. He says, how many times I got to get up and pee? He literally said that. Everybody's just like, well, are my kids okay or money? But he said that. And I was like, dude, I'm there. I don't worry about it. I just get up 5 times a night and pee. No, there's the other joke, Simon, is we've got to pee when we're peeing.
Not easier said than done sometimes.
Yeah.
Yes.
But in Blue Light, the middle of the song said, the future is scary.
Yeah.
So he does return that at the end saying the future of your language,
Yeah. But the future is scary. I think that's scary. It's scary if you're not sort of here and now. I mean, the future, you shouldn't really be thinking about the future, really. I mean, it's sort of, if you're, I mean, I read this as sort of kind of a different take on the Freak Out Manifesto almost, in the sort of, it's about throwing off outmoded standard, whatever the rubric is, modes of being and so forth, and being authentic. And I think this is just an update on that. And it's saying, if you don't, the price you pay is the future is scary,
Yeah. No, Frank's he's so important in nailing words. For a guy who claims he didn't read, he had to have read a lot. He had to have read a lot. And he knew that word environment was so important, that it's the context or the environment or the ground that is what is hidden. It's usually we go for, it's the, back to T.S. Eliot, the watchdog of your mind. You're going to rob your neighbor's house and the guard dog comes out and you give them a steak, a piece of meat, and the guard dog runs off and then you can commit the crime. Well, the piece of meat is content. That's all we usually go for in all these things. We go for the content and we don't understand the form, the ground, the hidden meaning,
Definitely.
But staying on sex, drugs, and rock and roll, this is a phenomenal thing that you put that in your book, and it's so important. And so I've studied this phenomenon of these 3 words sort of trope, or and Marshall said that advertising is sex, death, and technology. So sex could be feeling, emotion, impulse, intuition. Death could be time, and technology is anything we invent. So I've sort of flipped that 3, sex, death, and technology, to Everything is sex, death, and technology. But we did sex, drugs, and rock and roll. I would say sex, healing, intuition, and drugs is death because it's time. You take some drug and it ends. You can't get on a drug and be on it forever, really. There's an end, and then you got to do it again. And rock and roll is one of the greatest technologies ever. So, I mean, any thoughts on this? Taking sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and why you put in your book in the and what it represents, or what bigger.
Well, let me just deal with the well, not deal with, but let me just go back to what you said about what McLuhan said about sex, death, and technology. The thing that strikes me about that is that sex is the kind of like the honey trap kind of thing. You know, that's well, any advertising wants to kind of like sucker you in with something, and there's nothing better than sex. Humans, it's like a honey trap. Then death, the thing about death is advertising is trying to scare you. It's like the future is scary because you are going to die. And maybe this thing that we're going to sell you might just hold death off for a moment for you in some form or another.
Stave off death.
Stave off dying. And technology, well, that's just about, you know, another tool to make your life more spiffy, so that, you know, it's easier or more efficient. And I would read it that way, in terms of the way they're trying to tap into your psychology there. So it's like they're trying to attract you in, scare you, and then offer you a solution.
Create the disease
and offer the cure. Please. You know,
it's create the disease and offer the cure. But what would you say if, you know, that Marshall's saying spoken word, language, printed word is a technology?
Yes. It is, definitely.
So it's spiffy. It
trapped by it too. What?
So it is spiffy. It spiffs up the world.
It spiffs up the world. Yeah. Well, it spiffs up our consciousness. It allows us to do that, but it also traps us at the same time. Unless you're unless you keep yourself at the edge of it, you're kind of trapped by it. And this is where we come back to sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and the book. And as I in the introduction section of that, I stole shamelessly this thing from an Australian friend who told me about it. I have his permission, but the id entity. He's a poet, and he came up with the notion of identity and id entity, because id is the thing that Freud identified, and whether or not Freud was right to divide us into, you know, the id and the ego and the superego. He's taken it from that, but the id entity, the id in German just means it, you know, the it. But for whatever reason, when that got translated or traded into English, they couldn't at the time bring themselves to say the it. The Victorians, that was obviously too much for them, so they called it the id, which doesn't really mean anything very much except it's Latin for it. But the it is the thing that produces the feelings that you then kind of express through language. It's the inner you. It's the authentic you. So the argument I'm making is that language, apart from sort of making life wonderful for us through expanding consciousness, also traps us in the ways I was talking about earlier. You're trapped by your culture, you're trapped by language, you're trapped by your sense of identity and the whole notion of a soul and all those things. And we kind of somewhere know that, and we're always looking for some means of just going back to being more authentic. So sex is the best example of that. You know, when you're, you know, an intense sexual relationship is, you're not really dealing with too much words there. It's you're trying to get as close as you can to the essence of something much more profound. And that's essentially the Romeo and Juliet story. I was just watching something. No, it was a version of Romeo and Juliet. No, it was just reminding me of that again, that's the key thing. I mean, Romeo and Juliet is about sexual attraction across forbidden boundaries, right? You know, the
Yeah.
artificial boundaries of, you know, in that case, culture or tribe or, you know, groupings. I mean, that's just bullshit. That's the bullshit that comes with language. And the true thing is the attraction that those two people feel for each other. So, you know, that's where I talk about sex, drugs, and rock and roll being the antidote. You know, the way in which you can reconnect. Rock and roll, well, you know, music. It's sort of, you know, music is that the condition to which all art aspires, or whatever it was that Walter Pater said. So I mean that transcends language again, and drugs. Well, you know, we've all taken drugs at some time or another, and they have a way of either loosening your kind of connection with what you consider ought to be the rules, or questioning. It's a way of breaking down or allowing you, permitting you, giving yourself permission to be an asshole or whatever you want to do, to have to do to break the rules, because we all kind of know somehow within that we have to confront the rules. You can't just be stuck with the rules, or you're finished, you know.
Yeah, it's Frank saying, "Excuse me," because I was stoned. I was like, "Don't give me that excuse." It's like in college, my friends used to go, "I smoked a doobie, I ate some hash, I did quaaludes, and I did balloons." I was like, "You're bragging that you had to do all those?"
Yeah.
But there's two things you brought up there that are important. One is Bridget Bardot goes, "I don't think when I make love." I'm like, good luck. Like, how can you literally turn your brain off when you're doing something that's so immensely sensual and you don't really want your brain to be working? You want to like surrender to the essence of what sex is. So that was, that was really good you said that. But what is more fundamental, music or language?
What is more fun than music or language?
No, fundamental.
Oh, fundamental than music or language?
What is more fundamental, music
Yeah.
or language? Yeah.
Well, being alive. I mean, yeah. I mean, music, both music and language, in some form or another, are an expression of the id entity. You know, the id entity is the thing that we get born with, and we just simply decorate it using language in order to communicate with each other. And music, well, we might have a discussion about that. I don't know. It's sort of a Steve Pinker calls it auditory cheesecake. He says that it's just that comes with the. It's a side effect of language that we've become so sensitive to analyzing noise that we enjoy playing with the tensions of music. I think it's more to do with internal tension and the sort of the tensions that culture and language put you under. I mean, nobody can be completely free. Even a Zen master is not completely free. Well, it depends on what version of Zen you're thinking of. But you know, we're all subject to tensions and emotional issues, shall we say? And music, in some form or another, manages to express that in ways that are more satisfactory than language. One of your questions that you ask people is, what is your favorite form of information? No? Is that
correct?
Yeah, well, I think, you know, if we consider that music in some form or another is information, then I think my favorite form of music, of information, would be music.
Yeah.
But I'm not quite sure what the information is. That's the thing. And,
well, that's the beauty of it.
Yeah.
It's beyond what is defined. Okay, you know, one of my favorite answers was human touch. Well, we don't usually think human touch is information. And then Anne Magnuson said a hug. Well, a hug is a form of information, but generally people won't. They think printed word, you know, but, you know, I'd say the greatest answer I ever got was Norman Klein, who is a McLuhanite, but he writes about animation and teaches at Cal Arts. He's a smart guy. And I says, "What's your favorite form of information?" He said, "Honest." So he switched it from a noun to an adjective.
It's very good, very good.
And that was really because this is what I tell people in my podcast now, Simon, is me and you versus the wording on the questions. Well, what do you pursue more, happiness or meaning? Or do thoughts create emotions? Well, I don't know about the word create. So I go, well, figure out a new word. I'm for rewording or adjusting or changing the wording, because they go, well, my favorite was there. Do thoughts create emotions? And the guy goes, emotions create emotions. But give me a ballpark. Can you go another 30, another 15, another 10?
I can do another 30 if you're up for it. Yeah.
Another 30 is okay. Okay. So let's say this thing about identity was important to me. Both McLuhan and Krishnamurti both say violence is our search, or the human search for identity. So I'm curious of your thoughts on that as a prompt to going deeper into this word identity, because what I'm hearing, what's your Australian poet friend's name?
His name is he's Aryan. He's a German Indian.
Okay, let's just call him the poet.
Aryan von Camera.
Yeah.
There you go. Right.
And so just to clarify before you go in this deeper identity, he's saying words evoke more in their meaning. He's saying identity is spelled this way. Yes. But if you change it and you go id entity, he's saying that the id is an entity. What does that mean, entity? That the id is an entity?
Well, I think it's just the name for a presence, and the presence is the it within you that we sense as us, and we only sense it as us because we have the words for it. But I think every animal that, Wittgenstein notwithstanding, every animal has a sense of itself. I mean, you can see them; they clearly have a feeling. They're maybe not conscious of it, but they're aware of it. That it's the living, it's the focus of all the sensory information that comes in to us, through our senses. That's the entity. Now I'm just trying to think, because the word entity came up the other day, and I was trying to explain it to someone, and what the hell was it? Because it was some sort of SF thing. Oh God. Oh yeah, no, it was. Oh Jesus, yeah, it was oh God, horrifying. Tom Cruise, right? His latest film, the Mission Impossible, whatever it is. They're fighting the entity. Now the entity is some sort of AI sort of presence that nobody really knows what it is, and it's got hold of information that only he can take back, because Tom Cruise is going to save the world. Right. The shittiest film I've seen in forever. I'd never seen one before. I just sort of got suckered into thinking maybe I should see a Mission Impossible. Don't do it, folks. Don't do it, folks. It's bad. Anyway, so an entity is something that exists and is present, and that's about all you can say about it. Yeah. I think. Presence.
And so he's sort of helping us get a bigger picture on this word identity. Right. What identity does to us. Is it something that we're consciously, because one of my other questions is can art making be egoless? Can you be without identity and make art? Yeah. And then you get into trouble of what the word ego means, because people literally like this. Do you mean ego is a bad thing? Because it's more into that thing like, oh, you're egotistical. But then there's ego as Freud decided. So anyways, this whole thing is violence a human search for identity? What is language? What is language's role in identity? Yeah.
Okay, so I would say that rather than violence being a search for identity, violence is the price you pay for identity.
Yeah.
Because to the extent that you have a very defined identity that then becomes something that, I mean, it's difficult because you also have to think about it in terms of dominant cultures and sort of dominated cultures, because there's a reason if you are struggling against an oppressive culture that is trying to take you over, then there's a reason why you would feel more strongly about the need to have an identity in that sense. But it's a sort of a political thing, and we're talking more in a philosophical sense about what is an identity and how important it is an identity. And I kind of think, I mean, this again is a Zen line of thinking, but not only Zen, that, you know, that one is a vessel, if you like, that it's about allowing things to pass through you. The creative act is not so much about expressing your ego as getting your ego out of the way and allowing it to come through. And I think of, you know, Frank's guitar solos, for example, you know, where he's just on the spot and he's just reacting to the environment, as you put it, you know, which includes all the music, but not just that. And it's just, he goes for it. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. You know, it's not always going to work out, but it's about not being there somehow. You are channeling the greater entity, whatever that is.
Well, you know, Simon, let's stay on this Zappa's lyrics because it's something I wanted to talk about. Frank is an instrumentalist supreme.
Right.
He really he knew something along the line that writing songs with lyrics is part of this world he's swimming in.
Yeah.
And so I believe he was a channel and a vessel in a lot of ways. And he had to be discerning. But when he writes a lyric, I'll have the cheerleader help with my paper. Later, I'll go home and rape her. You better be careful nowadays letting that even out. And I don't rationale it. I say Frank was a reflection of his time. When he says, I want my titties and I want my beer, he wasn't saying me, Frank Zappa. He was a storyteller holding a mirror and sort of saying, this is what he didn't even drink beer. I mean, what, you know, Laurel Fishman said she saw Frank drunk once, like kind of drunk. Did you ever see Frank drunk?
No. I saw him drink, but I never saw him drunk.
Yeah. And so, you know, he had a balance, but he knew being a satirist, it's like that stupid Zappa documentary where the guy goes, Frank attacked everybody on this album. It's like, he didn't attack them. He was a satirist. That's his job. You know, it's all right to use that verb, but just this whole thing of what makes you laugh is juxtaposition of, like they said, the only way you can deal with the devil is to mock him. So, you know, maybe talk about that, you know, Frank in lyric writing as opposed to being an instrumental musician.
Yeah, I mean, I think he just felt that certain things had to be said. I don't really buy the notion that he would never have written lyrics or would only have ever written, you know, pieces for chamber orchestra and sort of, you know, like serial composition. And that, I think he was, and again, it's going back to the idea of selling out. It wasn't selling out. It was like, it was the vehicle that enabled him to do what he did. And along the way, he just saw stuff. I mean, let's just take, for example, let's go back specifically to Bobby Brown there. I mean, I mean, that is, you know, Weinstein right there, isn't it? I mean, it's sort of, you know, it is. It's calling out that behavior. It's saying, you know, I'll get a cheerleader to help my paper and maybe I'll rape her. I mean, that's been going on forever. And we haven't been talking about it, but he was calling it out. I mean, I don't see that as in any sense. I mean, if you think that's an endorsement and that's Frank Zappa speaking out, you weren't paying attention, surely. I mean, is there any? I mean, even Dynamo Hum. I mean, that's a sort of like a pastiche, isn't it, of sexual kind of misdemeanor, or even maybe not misdemeanor. I don't know, but it's I don't see it as being somehow necessarily of his time. I mean, titties and beer, does anybody believe that titties and beer are not sort of a currency in certain markets today anymore, any less or more than they were back in the day? I think not. So in terms of him writing lyrics versus being an instrumentalist, I think I once wrote something about it somewhere, which where I was trying to say that the lyrics are an attempt to try and break down the mentality that, well, stops you being authentic in the sense that we were talking about, but also stops you from appreciating his music. Because if you're expecting the music to be something along the lines of, you know, the top 10 hits and so forth, it isn't that. So it's the expectation that's the problem. And what I think his lyrics are so often trying to do is to undermine all the expectations that stop you from, excuse me, from seeing stuff straight. That's my kind of rather superficial take on it.
No, that was good, because there was a Lord Buckley documentary that never really got made, but the 15-minute sort of promo clip of it has a great line of a guy going, Lord Buckley subverted vaudeville joke telling. He made it into storytelling, and that's why he was the biggest influence on everybody. George Carlin, Robin Williams, Jonathan Winters, and especially Lenny Bruce, Frank Zappa. Because he taught them, you don't just tell jokes, you tell stories, and you subvert storytelling, you subvert joke telling. And you reboot it or recreate it. But you know, there's a phenomenon that I love to ask people is, tell me an instrumental that makes you laugh. Now, you can do it with Zappa's song or with non-Zappa, but I usually go, don't use Spike Jones or the other ones. But the more for you is, how could an instrumental make someone laugh? Can you laugh without language? Is really
yes, you can. I can't think of a piece of music offhand, but I mean, anything that's a parody can make you laugh. So it doesn't have to be a parody using words. It can be a parody in music or a parody in movement. I mean, Chaplin, you know, that's make you laugh without words. So yeah, you don't have to do it, but it's about, yes, it's about spotting the assumption and pulling the carpet out from the assumption. And that's what Frank does in everything that he touches. And I mean, we were talking about language, and I was saying how he'd never choose a word that was a cliche. He'd always try to put something there that you weren't expecting in order to just kind of, not even consciously perhaps, but subconsciously cause you to pop a pixel, as it were, in terms of seeing something that you hadn't seen before. And the way he plays music, it's always, the moment it starts to hit a kind of a cliche or a groove, you're out of there. And it's like, oh, I was just getting into that. No, exactly. That was the point.
That reminds me of how I explain Manipian satire is, Frank's got this great groove going, and all the Zappa ads who are really hate pop music, you know, and they're tapping their foot, and then he ends the song, do you really want to hurt me? And he quotes Boy George, and all these hardcore Zappa fans like, I hate Boy George. You just got me to sing it. How you do that? You know, it's so classic, you know.
I remember the first time I saw that in, I think, 1984, would it have been, in London? He and I'd not heard that song before, and suddenly it's like, oh my God! I mean, he's just, the whole audience is going, what? It
What?
was a great moment.
Yeah. And so there's the 5 why questions.
Yeah.
Who, what, when, why, and where.
Yeah.
For you, what's the most important
of those?
Yeah.
Rightly or wrongly, why? I think that's been my lodestar all my life.
That's what most people say. You know, Thomas Nordegg, who was really close to Frank and shot hundreds of hours of VHS, which should be on YouTube free. You know that. He shot tons of VHS.
Where is it? What's he doing with it?
He doesn't have it. I said, Thomas, you should have made copies of it all just to store it. Joe's got it, or, you know, the archives got it, hopefully. Yeah. And, you know, like lots. Thomas says, when? Now, most people say why. But I'm curious because you talk about this in your book and in your podcast. And then there's the 5 W questions. And then there's the H question, how?
Yeah.
You know, just use that as a prompt. You know, isn't who important? Hey, it's important that I'm here with you today, Simon. What? Yeah. Well, it's important we're on a fucking Zoom because we're both of our heads. We're better here than if we were in a room together because we're more immediately involved.
Yeah.
When 1 o'clock Saturday, you were there. Why? So we could talk. Where? In cyberspace. But in essence, we're in everybody's living room who wants to hit, as soon as it ends, they can hit a button and watch it.
Yeah.
And then how? So suss that out in your language explorations. The 5.
Well, the way I structure it in the book was that the first questions that language throw up are basically how questions, because the moment you can have some communication, then there's going to be the question of how do you do things that you need to do, because most of life is about kind of, you know, making stuff work, and how do you make it work? Why is much further down the line. So how is the brutal practical business of surviving? How do you make fire? How do you count? Well, the big example I use in the book is time. How do you measure time? You know, what are we going to do here? What's a day? You know, what's an hour? Why an hour? Why a week? How long's a week? I mean, all these things. In order for you and me to make this, you know, appointment to speak to each other, we had to draw on a whole set of assumptions about how you divide up time, because time doesn't actually exist in hours or minutes or seconds. It's just there all the time. But there are nonetheless ways that you can throw a net around it and measure it. So you have to make these decisions. That's kind of the first task of language, or at least the first thing that language allows you to do. And then when you've relaxed a bit and you're kicking about around the campfire, then it's suddenly, why? Why are we doing all this anyway? And then so that then becomes the religious quest. I think, you know, that all the answers that religions have come up with are an attempt to keep the why question at bay, because ultimately there is no why. You know, it's like, what is, as I was saying earlier, what is the problem to which life is the solution? Well, that's a what question, actually. But, and then the who question is the identity one. It's like, who am I? You know. And that's usually answered by, well, I'm the guy who hangs out with, you know, Winchell's Donuts with the highway patrol kind of thing, or I go down the local pub, or I support this football team, or whatever I do. You know, those are usually the kinds of answers that people give to the who question. And then when that becomes frustrated, that then, you know, creates violence and so forth. When I think I'm going to just defer to Frank here, because I think one of the great things he said, it's in that interview with is it with Don Mann, or is it the one you did with Bob, where he says the when will determine the what? The when determines the what.
The when determines the what.
Yes. That's an amazing thing. I mean, that is, you know, precisely about the sort of his method. You know, it's you may have worked something out and decided this is what you're going to do, but then when the time moves forward and it's something that there's a different environment, then the new when will determine the what. Whoa,
Yeah,
that's such a profound.
that's a good one. That's so good. You see the beauty of this. Now we can Google that statement and find if it's in Bob or in Don's. And it's just like such an amazing source material. But like I said, the sad thing is not every auditory interview has that, only the print. And that why in heaven's name hasn't some whiz kid got computer whiz figured that out and done every auditory transcribe?
Well, maybe it will happen in the future, but on the other hand, then now we're coming back to archive, right?
Yeah.
Let's join it back to the archive thing, because I don't know. Did you read the thing I wrote for the Crux of the Biscuit, the sort of liner notes about Mission Impossible rather than Mission Impossible, and you know the idea that, you know, we want to hear everything as a fan. You know, you really want to hear every last thing that he did and every last thing that he said, and it's important to have the whole archive. You know, but then at the same time, that's impossible. You know, it's not possible unless you were kind of living his life in real time. You can't have all that information. So what are we trying to take away from it? And for me, I think, you know, the edit is the important thing. It's again, it's like pattern recognition. He once said, as I'm sure you're familiar with, the thing about, you know, what is the most important qualification for being in the band? And he said, advanced pattern recognition. And I think that's also the clue to what we should be taking from this. I mean, you know, it's sort of why do we like the music and what he said and all these things? I mean, it doesn't, and if we're just going to slavishly imitate it, that doesn't really do anything. That's not sort of helping very much. I think we need to be taking away from it the essence of it, the method of it, the thing that then we can then the pattern. We want to find the pattern and then apply it to our own lives. Otherwise, it's just fanboy stuff, isn't it?
No.
Yeah. Unless we apply it.
That's the apply is so important, Simon. That little talk you just said was so important for me. I learned so much. It's pattern recognition leads to comprehensive awareness, the big picture, the big note. So it's how do you apply it? This is what I learned from listening to Harold Bloom on like Charlie Rose. The dude knew so much about literature. And he got in trouble because he dissed feminism or Marxism. But he knew so much that he could take a pithy little quote by Yeats and apply it, not just go, oh, look it, here's a pithy quote. He knew how to transform it. That's what you do with pithy quotes, with what Frank's saying. Nothing is what I want. Well, where can we take that farther, apply it to ourselves, or advance and move the project forward? Or the bottom line is, everybody, to make the world a better place. You know, it is possible to make the world a better place.
Yes, or to raise the consciousness, what's that quote? I think it's on just another band from LA, where he's saying, you know, to raise the level of consciousness, which is the purpose of the show, or something like that. It's just a sort of throwaway line. I mean, you know, if that is the purpose, then how do we take what we get from Frank and apply it? It's like it was back to 3 years learning the techniques and 10 years forgetting them, you know, because unless you can take what you've learned and apply it in your life, then what was the point, kind of?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I've just got delivery of belatedly, this thing just came through my letterbox. Grand was, you know, and I almost can't take any more. You know, I've got enough. There was enough in what he released in his lifetime. If you didn't get what he was trying to say, well, okay, that's a big thing. But if you didn't get it from what he released, then, you know, what's the point?
Hey, Frank didn't die young. He delivered the goods in 30 years. He delivered 60 albums.
Yeah.
And he says, I'm out of here. So what? You know, he lived. So all the power to, I don't want to go there, but it's the pattern recognition leads to comprehensive awareness, the big picture, conceptual continuity, you know, continuing it to us. Advanced pattern recognition, so important. You told me all that. The edit. And so this is, you know.
Oh yeah, and the other thing, just to sort of, I mentioned a mission impossible being the sort of like that's the fan thing, and then the edit is a mission accomplished.
Yeah.
Right, not mission accomplished, but omission accomplished, because you managed to cut out all the stuff that really wasn't necessary. You didn't need. You just got the essence. Once you got the essence, then it's omission accomplished. You know.
Yeah, that's really good. Omission accomplished is editing, is being discerning.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what Frank's true skill was. I think he was ultimately an editor. That's what he was so good at. I mean, everything that he did was an edit. And that's why he hated bootleggers, I think, because it was like he was unable to apply the edit, which was really the essence of his art.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know about the essence of his art, but it was a crucial feature of what he did.
You know, we got about 10 more minutes, and Simon, it's been truly enlightening. We got to do it more often, but there's a great discussion you have on one of your podcasts, or it's in your book, is you must, or you have to. Now, there's a thing that I love is people go, you should do this, or you have to do this. And it's people, again, using casual conversation. Like I send out a new thing on Harry Smith, must read.
Yeah.
And then when people say, you should do this, I goes, there's no should-haves in the world. You shouldn't say you should have done this. There's no have to do this. There's no must to do. As a gracious communicator, you go, I suggest, or I welcome your input on this, rather than pushing it. But that's just how we are emotionally involved. And so I looked up, you know, the etymology of the word must, and it's so funny because it means Old English, to have room, to be able to. Have room to be able to. So that's almost like the deeper meaning is, but then that's the verb must. No, wait a minute.
Well, it's not a verb. That's the verb.
Now there's 4 nouns for must. And it's almost like, what is this? Musk in 200 Motels, you know, this is must, the same stuff that Beatles get off on.
That would be really good to put that to must. Yes. Smells like must. Next time says you should do that, you say that smells like must.
But listen, I thought you'd get a kick out of this. The 4, and this is why Etymology Online is such an amazing website. There's 4 nouns for MUST. The first one is a new wine, WINE, and it's rooted in moss, MOSS.
Wow.
The second must is mold. And what is mold? That's like, you know, rust, your thing about rust. Even does rust and water, steel communicate? You know, they are.
Yeah.
The third noun for must is a male Elephant Frenzy. That sounds like a Zappa song, that he's drunk, or the line I love to repeat, Frank's ultimate dig at the Grateful Dead. I'll tighten my headband during Jerry's guitar solo for an extra rush. That's actually funny. That's worthy of Saturday Night Live. You had great comedy writing.
Yes, that would be good for Saturday Night Live.
But here's the fourth must noun. This has to be done. It has to be seen to be experienced. So it's like this thing where it's sense ratio shifting. Is language all five senses? We're hearing it, or we're reading it, or we're smelling it, or we're tasting it, or we're feeling it. Why, my Irish eyes are smiling. Well, eyes can't smile. So it's that all words are metaphoric, So any thoughts on this whole idea of telling people they must? Because really, what we're trying to do is shake people and say, you must read Simon's book. You must probe what speech has done to us. We have to. Why? Why can't people just be mellow and chill out?
Mellow, yeah. Well, we're back to why and what we're, what our purpose is, what our ethos is. It's like, if you are going down the path of wanting to know all that can be known, then there's this aspect that it might be worthy of your attention. I mean, must is the wrong word, clearly, but it's and as you say, we use it because we buy into the emotional engagement with the person we're talking to, and we're saying, Jerry, you really must get into this because I love you, man, and I want you to know this because it means so much to me. So, but it doesn't. There's no reason why you should, of course, ever. But if you're interested in, and I know you're interested in a particular thing, then I'll say, well, you should speak to Ben from the Jazz Cafe because you're really going to get off his take. So, must. I don't know if I have anything particularly.
Well, no, that was good, Simon, because it reminded me of Bob Dylan learned from the Bible. Don't ever tell anyone everything you know. If me and you met at a party and we start talking, oh, you're into Zappa, oh, you're into language, oh, I go, Simon, tell me everything you know. I want to tell you everything I know. It's a funny little thing that we do get to that point with people and excitement. Especially when you meet a younger person and they show some interest in something, you're like, hey, that's amazing. You're into this. Let's talk.
Well, fortunately now I can say, here's the book, go read it, and then we can talk.
Yeah, that's it.
It's a shortcut.
There's just in closing, there's a warning sticker that Frank put out. This album contains material which a truly free society would neither fear or suppress. It's really got great wording. Frank knew marketing and it was so beautiful. But I want to read this line to you from the warning sticker and hear your thoughts. The language and concepts contained herein are guaranteed not to cause eternal torment in the place where the guy with the horns and the pointed stick conducts his business. And it's sort of like the guaranteed not to cause eternal torment. And just any thoughts on Frank putting that on his album?
Well, none other than just, because hell doesn't exist, so there's no eternal torment, and it might cause you some temporary torment possibly, but there's nothing to be afraid of. So cross that off your list of things to be scared of, and when the future is scary, because that ain't scary because it doesn't exist. I think that's what all he's saying, isn't it?
Yeah. Simon, what does freedom mean to you now? And I'm curious, I'll suss it out a little. The word freedom etymologically, one of my questions is, Anarchy is making rules for yourself and not other people. That's Utah Phillips. Now, that's an interesting, a guy who specializes in anarchy says that's not anarchy. This is a folk singing activist going, anarchy is making rules for yourself and not others. So it's sort of like an interesting attempt at defining a word, but giving it a little twist. Then I look up the word freedom in etymology, and it says giving oneself one's own laws. That's what freedom is.
Giving oneself one's what?
Own laws. Give exactly what you said. Making rules for yourself. So, T.S. Eliot said freedom is only truly freedom when it appears almost freedom is only truly freedom when it appears against the background of an artificial limitation. McLuhan said, how are you to argue with people who insist on sticking their heads in the invisible teeth of technology and calling the whole thing freedom? So, I mean, it's way too much on freedom, but it's basically, what does freedom mean to you now?
Well, I'm going to just do another quote on freedom that I recall suddenly. King Alfred from whatever it was, the 8th century or something, 9th century, allegedly said, the highest freedom is to realize that you are not free.
Wow.
Well, and now we're talking back about being a vessel and, just sort of being an instrument for God's purpose, as I'm sure he would have put it, meaning, you do what the circumstances, what the environment requires, the when determines the what sort of thing. So the freedom to be able to do that, because, the idea that we can be completely free from the constraints of needing to get up 5 times at night to pee or whatever it is. I mean, it's not going to happen, right? So you'll be absolutely free only when you want to be is true to the extent. And I think that was genuinely meant and not a parody of hippie thinking as Ben Watson likes to think. I think that was from the heart, that one. But it's about being authentic, being as least beholden to anyone else's thoughts or expectations or requirements as you can be. Well, maybe not requirements, because then that's part of the whole sort of the when determines the what, because you'll be in a situation where your help is required, somebody else requires your help, but it's allowing. What does freedom mean to me? It means not feeling artificially constrained and owning yourself. I think that's the thing, to own yourself. It's a hugely important thing. To the extent that you resent any aspect of your life, you hold somebody else accountable for some part of your unhappiness or anything else, that's a barrier to freedom. And so, owning yourself will open a lot of shit for you, as Frank said in some other quote that I can't remember. It might have been when determines the what. And I'll just finish, if I may, on a thing that Confucius once said that I think is a beautiful thing. And since we're both on the cusp of it, I think it's a good note to end on. Maybe he said, this is rough paraphrase of what he said, is that when he was 15, he realized the importance of study, and he devoted his time to studying. When he was 25, he went out into the world to find something he could do. When he was 30, he found something that he felt right about doing. When he was 40, he'd mastered that skill. When he was 50, he realized what he should have been doing. When he was 60, he finally got around to doing it. And when he was 70, it's like everything was fine. Whatever he did was fine. That was that's freedom at that point.
That's
when
good.
You get to the point where everything is, you can, anything, everything is grist to your mill. You know, anything that comes along, you can make a way to make it work and fit. And ideally, you know, hey, we're only human.
Yeah, but it is a good summary, and I feel that at my point in life, being 70 years old, 70 years young, that everything's fine, you know. And I do let things get to me, like I don't want to travel or whatever, but just like just chill and be as true to yourself as you can. You know, Alan Watts says, you know, everybody's trying to figure out who they are. If you figure out who you are, you're fucked. You know, so it was beautiful how you summarized all that, and especially because
well, let me just say, but we'll give you.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
So just on the age thing, since I'll be joining you in 70 in a couple of months' time.
What's your birthday again? What's the date?
It's November 26th.
November 26, 1953.
That's the one. Yeah. So anyway, Mark Twain, you know what he said about age? He said, age is mind over matter. He said, if you don't mind, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I think that absolutely nails it. I've been telling a lot of people that recently. I read it and I thought, yes, that's the one.
And to top it off, as Captain Beefheart, the stars are matter, we are matter, but it doesn't matter. It's, you know, it's, the beauty is we can integrate our studies in our play with Zappa quotes and do what you just said, apply them and take them a little further. And I appreciate our relationship in doing this for so many years, and continue to do that. I did leave out the line, why does it hurt when I pee? Well, that isn't a line. That's a question. As John Cage would say, that's a very good question. That's a very good question. I wouldn't want to ruin it with an answer.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But Simon, McLuhan said communication of the new is a miracle, but it's not impossible. And you constantly prove that to me, that we can communicate newness. Thank you so much for your time and energy, my friend. That was brilliant.
Thanks for talking to me. It's always a pleasure. We always go somewhere unexpected. It's good. I love it.
And even though I'm going to hit the end broadcast button, I hope this never ends and we can keep talking forever and ever.
Absolutely. And we'll be here forever. We're now in the cyberspace forever.
It's why Gregory Peccary invented the calendar or something like that.
The eons are closing.
All times are happening now, all at onceness.
Oh. See you, Jerry. Love to Susie.
Love you. Thank you.